am live. I am in the second part of the book, Return to Elysium. It's a lovely old hardback I got here. It's a book written by Joan Grant. She was a seer and used to write the life of her previous incarnations. This one is her life as Lucina, and she was on the Elysium for 4 years, and she has left Elysium because she didn't feel that she was she could do better for herself, I think. Anyway, she's off to Rome, and she has got 2 companions with her. This is the beginning of the second chapter of part 2, and it's entitled Temple of the Tiber. Displays 2nd century BC. A plume of water freshened this sultry afternoon. I lay on blue and violet cushions, considering the pattern made by vine tendrils against beams of the pergola and the heat-heavy sky. I had to pretend an indolence I could not feel, so stopped myself worrying about our insecurity. After 6 months in the villa, we could still maintain an outward show of luxury, but even Tyro, our steward, must have begun to realize that our debts were unpaid because we had so little money left. Tribute for Lucina from Rome. It had been easy enough to say, easy enough for me to believe until I was defeated by its translation into actuality. Gradually I discovered, after I had watched their increasing anxiety and found myself powerless to effect a cure, what Narcissus and Epicurus had expected of me. I was to have been the main pillar of our security, the beautiful, mystical Greek, neither virgin princess, priestess, nor hetaera, but a subtle blend of both without the obligation, who was to become the envy of the circle to whom the letter of Asclepius gave us entry. My insight into the Roman character was to have made my opinion, my taste, a criterion of culture. This is the scene as we imagined it. A banquet, Lucina the focus of attention, the envy of the women, because she had proved herself more than the equal of the men. Lucina, brilliant and remote, inviolate only because she was too subtle to be beguiled by Roman flattery. Then Narcissus, with feigned reluctance, would allow himself to be persuaded to design clothes and jewels for matrons who found themselves jealous of Lucina. Epicurus would be the link with the merchants, taking for us a substantial profit. To this end we permitted ourselves a limited extravagance. I had certain essential jewels. Narcissus bought a chariot with 2 black stallions. Epicurus paid several merchants to keep selected antiques until we would require them. But Lucina had failed in her role. The men we met gave me the attention due to any woman whose appearance is not entirely displeasing. Yet, when I tried to talk of serious matters, they failed to conceal their boredom. The women, finding that I was at a disadvantage when they gossiped about people of whom I had never heard, pitied me for a foreigner who had failed to find a husband. I even had to pretend that Narcissus was my brother, to prevent myself being snubbed by women I despised, plump, indolent, stupid women. It was not made easier when Narcissus frequently became impatient. Lucina, I have provided you with the right clothes, and nature gave you eyelashes, and a profile which would distinguish a coinage. But what do? How do you expect to please when you make no effort to conceal that the company in which you find yourself is, in your opinion, appallingly inferior? Why don't you treat them like children, flatter them, praise them a little, and then at least we shall never lack free meals? There was nothing practical I could do to help. I suggested going to the market to get cheaper food, but Epicurus said that this would soon become slaves' gossip and destroy our credit. There was no point in doing the cooking, for old Portia did it far better. Portia. I could have dug in the garden, but why should I, when the gardener could easily manage our small plot of ground? I wore my new bracelets, knowing that they might have to be sold to pay a shipmaster to take us back to Greece, when we could no longer afford our pride. I heard someone cross the terrace, looked up to see Tyro, and called to him to bring me a pitcher of fruit juice. It was not sufficiently chilled, and I envied the woman who had enough slaves to bring snow down from the mountains. Tyro also brought me a letter, but for a while I was too lazy to read it. I broke the seal without interest, expecting it to be another invitation from someone who would give us an over-elaborate meal, and then take no further trouble when he found we could not return the hospitality. It was from a man called Salonius. The name was unfamiliar. He said he had heard of me from a fellow physician in Athens, and invited us all to his house 3 days later. While I was reading it, I heard a chariot drive into the stable yard. When Narcissus joined me, I said indifferently, "We have got the chance for a free meal. We may as well accept, though probably the host expects us to pay for it with some of Asclepius' formulae. Let Epicurus do the bargaining, and we may get a good price. Fortunately, I retain the elements of decency, even if you don't. I may have betrayed the hospitality of Elysium, but I can still keep a confidence." "No one is arguing with you," said Narcissus briskly, "and do please try not to be so depressing. This Salonius, whoever he is, probably has better wine than we can afford, and we still have litters to bring us home and beds to sleep in. I could do with a cheerful evening if I no longer have the price of a Dionysian headache." So I agreed to go, though not without a certain display of reluctance. We should be able to eat without adding to our debts, and it would be satisfactory to show our host that money could not buy everything, even in Rome. Salonius was short, dark-haired, and decisive. He was obviously prosperous, for his house had a large garden on the south bank of the Tiber, and the appointments were lavish. The food was excellent, and Epicurus was not disappointed in the quality of the wine. During the meal our host spoke of Athens, and led me on to talk of subjects for which I had felt starved. No longer did I have to search for topics of conversation. No longer did I feel ignored. Respect and admiration were stimulating, and for the first time I felt relaxed and kindly in Roman company. "You look beautiful tonight," whispered Narcissus. "You must remember you should wear violet more often. Most illuminating to your hair." "Give me intelligent conversation, and you need not worry so much about my clothes," I retorted, smiling to show that I did not resent his claiming my small success for himself. Slaves brought bowls of rose water for us to rinse our hands, then left us alone with our master. I knew that now we should learn the object of our invitation. "I am aware that in Greece it is permitted to speak without evasion," said Salonius. "In Rome it is more usual for truth to be going disguised, so that if unwelcome, she may be ignored." "Truth is always sure of hospitality in the house of a friend," said Epicurus smoothly. "Then we are agreed. This meeting is, I hope, to prove propitious to us all, especially to Lucina." I still thought he was going to make an offer for secrets which I had no intention of selling, so I continued to lie back on my couch. I have a full description of the events which took place in a certain cottage, close to an estate called Elysium. I was so surprised that I sat bolt upright, but Salonius appeared not to notice the effect of his opening remark. I was permitted to read the correspondence between a valued colleague and a man who now prefers to call himself Asclepius. It was only by chance that on my return from Athens I heard of a Greek girl who had arrived in Rome with 2 men who bore the same name as 2 other pupils of Elysium. It was said that the girl was the sister of Narcissus. That did not coincide with my information, but the clue was too exciting not to be further investigated. "He's not my brother," I said. "We thought it sounded better. Platonic friendship seems beyond the comprehension of matrons." "Your action was fully justified. It is never politic to tell the audience more than they can digest. I hope you will forgive me if I ask a question, which you may consider is none of my concern. We have already agreed that truth need not go disguised among friends." I could tell by the tone of his voice that Narcissus had also decided to trust Salonius. "Did you leave Elysium because you could not agree with a way of life which claims to be realistic, but in fact, avoids any issue which does not agree with certain preconceived ideas. We decided that none of us could become philosophers in the school of Asclepius. Perhaps it was too difficult for us. Again, you must forgive me if I appear impertinent. Are you finding this new environment so fruitful as you expected? We have not been here very long, began Epicurus cautiously. I interrupted him. We could no longer afford evasions. Either we must trust Thelonious or admit we had failed. We've spent nearly all our money. We have achieved nothing since we came here. Narcissus and Epicurus believed in me. They brought me away from Elysium because I was too unhappy to stay there any longer, and I have been a failure. She hasn't, said Narcissus. None of it has been her fault, said Epicurus. Circumstances have in fact been extraordinarily benign, said Thelonious. Benign? You wouldn't think it benign to go for a few dull banquets and not be asked again because nobody could understand our kind of conversation? You wouldn't think it benign to be sneered at by complacent matrons who couldn't produce a single intelligent idea if their silly lives depended on it? He laughed, but it was a kindly laughter. I still call circumstances benign which refuse to let you waste your talents, and yet brought you to the place, and if I may claim this without immodesty, to the man who can arrange for the field of their complete fulfillment. If you will agree to work with me, I think that none of us will go unrewarded. I liked him still more for the honesty which openly included himself in the prospect of reward, and so I could see did Epicurus. Can we hear your plan before we make a decision, said Narcissus, or is it too soon to ask for details? It is not too soon. I was aware of the supreme importance of Lucina's faculties immediately I heard of their existence. At that time I did not hope for such good fortune as would let us work together. I have been searching for some other man or woman who could take the place, which I now realize has been waiting for her. So you really believe I can be of some use? I said eagerly. That I can help people who will pay me so that we needn't worry about money? I have every confidence that you can help people. I am also sure that even if you had less effective powers, they would still be of inestimable benefit if properly presented. As to their value in terms of coinage, how much will a man or a woman pay for health? How much will they pay for freedom of the soul? To answer that question, you have only to count the temples in Rome, cults from every country, which has come under our influence, and none of them can offer more intercession with impatient and illogical gods. You will supply the power, I the method of its expression. I can provide the patience, you have the insight into the hidden source of their disease. I will use my knowledge of the Roman's credulity, which is both the root of this extraordinary singleness of purpose, and also of his compassionate faith in anything he cannot understand. He poured snow-chilled wine into silver goblets and handed one to each of us. I give you Lucina, he said, and to the four of us, prosperity and power. So I finish here the second chapter. There is more to come.